Welcome to today's webinar, The Hidden Costs of Fleet Accidents and How to Avoid Them, presented by Element. I'm Manuela Colis for Government Fleet, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we will try to address them all. However, if we do not get to yours, don't worry. You will be contacted with an email response after the event. I am joined by our speakers today, Mark Iarillo, Senior Director of Element Risk Solutions, Bill Collins, Managing Director of Element Fleet Management, and Brian King, Business Development Manager at Geotab. Thank you all for being here. Tell us a little bit more about yourselves. Who wants to start? Don't be shy.
Thanks, everybody. So thank you so much for the introduction, Manny. My name is Mark Iarillo. I am the Senior Director of Element Risk Solutions, and Element has a suite of options crafted specifically to help our clients manage their total cost of risk as it's integrated into the total cost of operation. So that's something that we pair very, very strongly with our clients to help them have an all-encompassing view and a holistic approach to however they are managing their risk today. We have solutions to help them approach that risk transfer.
Thanks, Mark. And I'm Bill Collins from Element Fleet Management. I run the government group here. So we work with governments across North America, helping them manage their fleets and achieve operational excellence and increase their savings. It's great to be here. Thanks very much.
And good afternoon. My name is Brian King. As Noel said, I'm the Business Development Manager in the public sector for Geotab in North America. And Geotab is the global leader in the connected vehicle space. So we're delivering the data insights to help agencies go in and improve driver safety and hopefully mitigate the risks involved with operating a fleet.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you for that. So with that, I'll let you guys get started with the presentation.
Thank you so much. Just to be respectful of everybody's time, I think it's only prudent that we dive right in. And I think we start with a little bit of a quick round robin. I think one thing we all know is that fleet accidents are costly, but most of us only think about the costs that appear on the balance sheet. So, for Bill and Brian, I'll ask you guys, what do you think in one sentence is the most overlooked consequence of a fleet accident? And Bill, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, obviously vehicle accidents are costly, and for governments, it's even greater. Removal of the vehicle from its function and its mission are really critical to a government. Unlike our vehicles, which we may use day to day for work or traveling to and from work, government vehicles are very specialized, and they have a mission to accomplish. Taking that vehicle out of circulation really works against the government's mission, and how long it stays out of commission is also a factor. So I think when we're thinking of governments and we're thinking of collision management, we're thinking of the value of that vehicle to the government and what it's doing on a day-to-day basis and ensuring that it's there most of the time, if not all of the time.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Mark, I would echo, some of Bill's sentiments there. What we hear quite a bit from our clients is in those cases, it is a challenge because every type of vehicle they're operating is really specific to certain vocational duties of that vehicle. So in the event of an accident, it is the challenge of going and identifying a like asset within the fleet to be able to replace that damaged vehicle. And then it's just the continual downstream effects of that lost productivity due to the accident, not only on the vehicle side, but you also could be looking at having some personnel that are maybe injured or out, and there's some productivity loss there as well.
Yeah, I think that the impact on the day-to-day operations really can't be overstated, right? We in many cases have specific vehicles for a specific purpose, and the interaction of both those vehicles and the the change in the circumstance of that vehicle, and if, as you mentioned, Brian, an employee is injured in any way, shape, or form, obviously has a significant impact. For me, I think one of the things that folks don't spend a lot of time thinking about is the reputational risk and reputational cost that happens when there is a crash. For many government fleets, for many private fleets, they do kind of operate as a rolling billboard. You do have your municipality's logo, or you do have your company's logo painted right on the side of that vehicle, and it's essentially a rolling billboard advertising, hey, we're operating on behalf of XYZ. So I think it is important for folks to understand how you handle that crash, and what you do to mitigate that in a timely fashion is very important in the terms of your reputation in the communities and markets that you serve. So having touched on some of the overlooked costs, let's dig a little bit deeper into where government fleets may underestimate the impacts of the overall, repair and accident process. And Bill, I know you spend a lot of time with government fleets, and when you're consulting with your government clients, where do you see the biggest, we'll call them, misconceptions about the overall accident management process?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And it's very easy for a government. They're really programmed to break the process down into individual pieces, and that's we trying to keep costs as low as possible. You really want to isolate where you need support. Collision management is one of those areas where sometimes governments can break them down. What is, do I really need assistance with first notice of loss? Do I really need assistance with finding collision shops? Do I really need assistance with subrogation? Or can I do some of these procedures myself? We tend to take a holistic view of the entire process. That information we derive in the beginning is really critical to the other pieces of the operation. So gathering that information right after an accident occurs really plays into the whole collision repair process and ultimately resolution of the claim. So taking a holistic view, we can take advantage of the information that's provided and really drive the savings throughout the whole process. Breaking it down sometimes can create inefficiencies, even though it's well-intentioned, and on its, in appearance, appears to be the most effective way of going about it. In reality, taking that 30,000-foot view may provide greater value in the long run. So that tends to be our approach and what we advise our clients to do.
Thanks so much for that, Bill. And Brian, in your experience, are there types of costs, or are there operational impacts that fleets tend to overlook after the accident has occurred?
Yeah, Mark, I think it's a lot of it is around just time, right? So administrative time for fleet managers and staff, as they have to dedicate significant time to reporting and managing through their internal incident process. So it's a matter of what that involves, and how can we kind of help them navigate through that with as much information and clear, concise data as possible, to help reduce that kind of back office time that is associated to any time that there is a accident out in the field, and then just the managing through that process with them. So we see a lot of that just from the administrative side, and then also obviously there's costs to, there was obviously somebody driving that vehicle at the time of the accident. So then you have just the costs that would be associated to injuries, or again, just misproduction, because maybe that person is out of work for a few days if there's any injuries.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces that I'm always drawn to when we think about managing loss costs and managing cost of risk is people are very focused on mitigating the downtime and getting that vehicle back up and running, which is extremely important. But there is another side of that coin, right? In many of these crashes, it may not be the fleet operator who was the person at fault. And so having a very strong subrogation program, but more importantly, a subrogation strategy, is important. And we understand that these require a really specialized set of skills. And I think one thing that's often overlooked, specifically in the government arena, is how do I accomplish this properly? Am I making the investments here internally? and going out and finding the talent and finding the people with the right skills and certifications to lead our subrogation program? Or do I have a partner who can, work with me and recover on my behalf? When you find a really well-managed subrogation program, you're often able to recover anywhere from 30 to 50% of your entire repair budget. And I think that's something that really is attractive, especially in the government space, when we know that there's a lot of eyes on managing your overall budget and your forecast year to year and staying within those numbers. So, we've kind of defined the problem, right? We understand that accidents go well beyond, hey, I had a fender bender, what now? And let's talk a little bit more about how fleets can respond a little bit more strategically. Because at its heart, a well-run accident management program is not just about reacting. It's truly about planning ahead. So, Bill, in your experience, what role does a proactive strategy and planning ahead play in reducing accident costs before they happen? And how do you work with your government clients to help them prepare for that?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Mark. And that's a great question. The best way to operate an effective collision management program is ensure collisions never happen to begin with, right? And one of the ways we can do that is with safety programs. Safety programs have kind of evolved from kind of an afterthought with collision to really being paramount to collision management today. Identifying risky driver behavior in a very kind of pragmatic way and undertaking remediation and training to ensure that those drivers are driving these vehicles as safe as possible is really the best way to prevent collisions. It's knowing your drivers. It's ensuring that there's training for your drivers to prevent an accident before it ever happens. Technology is definitely helping us really achieve that. But, you can't substitute training simply with technology. Certainly, it's very helpful. Monitoring driver behavior is to a certain extent, the real truth. But you want to do this in a way that makes all drivers safe and really prevents the critical accidents that you really don't want to happen. So, safety, don't underestimate it. Whatever it costs, the savings going forward will more than pay for the training and other products that you enter into your system. So.
Thanks, Bill. And Brian, I know, in your experience, there's, quite a bit of technological intervention that exists, right? And in your experience from the technology side, where do you see the most opportunity to streamline the overall response today?
Yeah, so I think, Mark, like as Bill mentioned, there's, a lot of focus and we put a lot of effort into helping agencies build out some strong safe driving behaviors and a good safe driving process across the agency as a whole. And it really, for us, it's all about utilizing the available insights to move away from reacting to incidents to identifying, managing, and ultimately eliminating risks by hopefully evaluating and creating overall safer driving behaviors throughout the agency. So we really look at it as, take advantage of the data that's available, and it will help support, the safe driving programs that they have in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very clear the best way to, reduce your costs and streamline the process is to eliminate the accidents from happening in the first place, right? But, I think the reality is, as much of a step forward as anyone can take, it's impossible to reduce all accidents. So one of the things that, I think is extremely important and, perhaps is something that's overlooked in many cases is having a holistic approach to integrating all those pieces that we've mentioned so far today, right? You want to be able to integrate the downtime management of the repair. You want to be able to integrate the F&OL process, the safety solutions that you have in place, whatever that might be, and the subro, the recovery piece. You're going to want to look to bring that all in a solution where all those programs are working together to solve the problem, rather than living in siloed areas as operational inefficiency. You want to make that an operational efficiency where the left hand and the right hand always know what each other are doing. So I think we really hit on something key. Technology and data are really game changers for prevention. So let's talk a little bit about that prevention. So I think the key here, and Brian, we're going to lean on your experience, is everyone thinks of technology and telematics as that intervention tool. But a lot of people think of telematics as GPS tracking. How do we reframe that conversation and talk about how it helps to really identify and correct high risk driving behavior?
Yeah, Mark, I think that, just overall as telematics has been, more widely adopted, we're seeing that, kind of paradigm shift away from looking at the GPS as just, dots on a map and going back and historically looking where vehicles have been, to really kind of moving forward to where folks are now leveraging the telematics data to provide insights into the driving behaviors, and allows them to really go through, identify and coach high-risk drivers, and help eliminate poor driving behaviors, and reduce, the risks of accidents. So it's really going in and, again, leveraging the broad scope of data that is available to them, and giving them the tools to have insights and to be able to manage to their safety program. So really providing them with the data that maybe they didn't have in the past.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for the three of us up here who are obviously believers, and we're people that are ingrained in this arena every day. It's easy for us to talk about the benefits and why fleets should institute these programs. But I think for a lot of the folks that are watching along and our viewers today, what they're interested in is, hey, I have to make a business case in order to get this approved. Brian, can you share like a concrete example of how a fleet has used telematics data to improve their fleet safety outcomes?
Yeah, Mark. So we have a client of ours. They're a state Department of Transportation fleet. They have approximately about 4,500 vehicles or so that are operating throughout the state. And they put in a pretty aggressive driver safety program, and again, leverage the telematics data to support it. And as they went through it, they did some implementation, got it off the ground, and then went back and evaluated the results over a 1-year period. And what they saw was driver safety scores dramatically increasing, so a big uptick in their safe driving behaviors. One of the big focus points they had was folks wearing seatbelts, so they had a almost 100% improvement in when it came to safety belt usage. So less than 1% of the time where they were seeing anybody still with seatbelt violations. And same thing, very measurable results in reducing speeding. Both in a couple of different scenarios. They looked at some initial speeding events and then maybe some of the more severe speeding events. A big decrease and almost eliminating any incidents where they had any state vehicles that were exceeding the speed limit by 15 miles per hour. So ultimately, what did it kind of do for them in adopting these safe driving behaviors was really looked at a decrease in the fleet liability claims overall. So 25% reduction in the claims, severity of the claims down significantly. And ultimately for them, it was a savings that they realized of over $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, from a risk management standpoint, we've seen telematics data kind of really change the game on the internal conversations that we're having. To steal a sports metaphor, we're able to make in-game adjustments rather than have a conversation at the end game presser about how we lost that game, right? And I think we've gotten to a position where we're moving from reaction to predictive and prescription. And we can work with our clients and work with our fleets to drip right down to the driver level and take it beyond, hey, as an organization, this is what we're looking at. Hey, and the individual driver level, this is how we can improve, and this is how we can become safer and we can become better. I think this is something that is key when we're looking at combining accident management outcomes and telematics data to improve their overall process. So, Bill, how do you see government fleets doing exactly that, combining their accident management program with their telematics data to improve those claim outcomes?
Yeah, it's drivers are, drivers have incidents and they report those incidents afterwards. What we want the real truth, right? We all want to put the best face on a collision when it happens. It wasn't my fault. The brakes didn't work. There was something in the way, and trying to undertake the old-fashioned way of determining faults in an accident is look at the skid marks, look at the damage to the vehicles, look at the position of the vehicles. Technology's really improved that, right? It's totally rewritten the rules and really improved outcomes and determining who's at fault. It reaffirms the whole truth. So bringing in that technology really overall makes everyone a safer driver. Incorporating that technology and seatbelt usage, driver behavior, vehicle analytics really brings so much more information to bear for governments to really decipher what happened, how can we improve this going forward, and how can we train these drivers to be safer drivers. So, all part of the collision management process.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, I think one of the goals I mentioned earlier is for us to give all the folks that join the conversation today enough arrows in the quiver to build their own internal business case and hopefully be able to move forward with some very well managed safety and collision programs. But I think we have to be honest that roadblocks will always exist even after these folks get approval internally. And I think after approval is given, adoption of the program can be one of the toughest parts because you've got both drivers and operators that have been doing things the same way for a long period of time. So, how do we overcome these, right? Like, Bill, what do you hear as some of the most common objectives about adopting these programs and how do you help them overcome this?
Yeah, telematics kind of strikes at, personal values and personal privacy, right? I'm a driver, and I take that, my driving is very, very internal to me and personal to me. I don't really want people looking over my shoulder and commenting on how I drive. But the bottom line is most of us are fairly good drivers. We all make mistakes, but we're fairly responsible drivers. There is a relatively small percentage of drivers that might be considered a bit outside the box and in need of training. And if we can address that 1 or 2%, we're really helping probably the vast majority of our collision management program, right? We want to identify those drivers who are most unsafe and remedy that. So really, in the interest of safety, this technology is beneficial to governments, and it will lead to lower costs going forward if we adopt it. And it is a tough pill. And really, telematics programs are still debated at the state level. There are states out there that have not adopted telematics programs. They are still overcoming these challenges, pushback from unions and others about monitoring drivers at work, right? But in the end, safety will win. And over time, we've seen these, the savings that are associated with these programs and these technologies as really benefiting governments, and that's really winning the day. So in the interest of safety, telematics will be victorious in the end. More and more governments are adopting it, and really the data it provides and the outcomes it provides is really beneficial to governments going forward. It's the wave of the future. It's really the wave of the present. And it can only benefit governments.
Excellent. That's very well said, Bill. And, you really hit on a couple of things there, specifically on the tech adoption side. So, Brian, when we see fleets that, perhaps Bill mentioned that had not adopted telematics previously, and now that's where they're headed, like, what do you see, where do you see from the tech side most agencies struggling with adoption, and what have you seen them do to push through that initial pain?
Yeah, we really see a couple areas, right? Initially being budget constraints that they may be faced with. And then once we can kind of get around that constraint, It's then looking at the just sheer people resources and the time that goes into the initial implementation of a telematics program. And then how do we work with that client to identify and really get the data around their safe driving program. So I know for us on the GeoTab side, we spend a lot of time and we've developed some specific resources for our clients. So they have project managers to help push them through the implementation process. So everything from, if there are budget constraints, we have available cooperative contracts, and we'll work closely with their procurement folks to try to get through some of those challenges. And then when it's time for the actual implementation, installation of devices within vehicles, working with them to, how can we best plan out and eliminate as much interruption to their operations as possible as they go through the adoption phase. And then it's really, once that is complete, it's going in and identifying the data sets that they need to support their safe driving program. So like in the example we shared earlier, that the DOT took quite some time and put in a lot of effort to make sure that they had a clear, concise, safe driving program. It was communicated out statewide. And they did invest time into going through and enforcing the driving program. They leveraged the data, so it wasn't, couldn't really be disputed by the drivers. And they did it in a way that was very driver friendly as well. They did some rewards and incentive programs. So it wasn't necessarily punishing drivers, it's more about recognition of who were the safe drivers. And then having the ability to go back and coach maybe some of the folks that needed a little additional kind of coaching or, calling them out just so they were kind of adhering to the safe driving program. So, we've worked with customers and try to eliminate as many of those constraints as possible. We understand that they do exist, but we'll work through those with them.
Yeah, I think you touched on something important there when you started mentioning working with procurement and working with operations. Fleet in general, but more importantly, fleet safety and risk goes way beyond just one department within any organization. And, where I see the biggest risks to success, but also the biggest wins when it's done properly, is aligning those internal departments together. You really have to have buy-in at the procurement level, at the ops level, at the risk management level. You have to be, to steal an old sales term, you got to be 3 deep and 3 wide within your organization, both internally as your champion and for us as the provider, right? We really need to understand the impact on each level of the organization as you're rolling out a program like this. And when it's done well, you really start to see the different silos that can exist in any organization come down, because there is that common goal of both keeping your employees and your community safe, but also driving down costs, which has impact so far beyond your departmental budget. It can impact the entire organization or the entire community if you can really mitigate a lot of those risks. So I think the most important step that people can take is reaching across the aisle and making sure internally you understand how any program you'd be interested in launching impacts the other departments that are interdependent on the fleet and on the operations today. And, I think with that, let's talk about some practical next steps. I think we've been talking for about a half an hour now, and we want to make sure we have plenty of time for all of our guests to ask us questions. So, quick lightning round, and Bill, we'll start with you. What is one step the fleet leaders on this call can take this month to uncover or reduce hidden accident-related costs?
I think, and we've covered this before, I think identifying high-risk drivers is probably the one single action you can do. It tends to be the low-hanging fruit in terms of really providing immediate savings. If you can identify that 1 or 2% that may need additional assistance and training, you can improve your whole collision management process going forward.
Excellent. Brian?
Yeah, I would kind of echo that statement. It's really utilizing the data available and leveraging that connected vehicle data to understand where your biggest risks for accidents are, and then help to increase good driving behavior going forward.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm gonna take it back a little bit because we've gotten deep into some safety programs, and we may have some fleet leaders on the call today that are saying, hey, that's way beyond where our current process is today, right? And so for those folks, I would encourage you to take a look at your actual costs and understand how deeply into those costs you're able to define what falls into each category. If your line item for repair spend is one bucket today, I think the most important step that you could take is finding a way to break that line item down into all your various costs, whether that is bent metal, rentals, any F&OL associated costs, and also subrogation. You want to make sure you have clear line of sight to where your dollars are actually going so you can make a material impact on reducing those dollars. And finally, I think we'll ask you, Bill and Brian, is there one myth that you'd like to dispel about overall accident management? And Brian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that, we spend a lot of time talking about safe driving behaviors, and I think the one thing that, while that really helps mitigate maybe the risks of the agency as a whole, accidents don't only happen to bad drivers, right? Good drivers can also be involved in accidents because there's many factors that go into it. It's not just your driving behaviors, but it's all of the other folks out there that are driving as well. So, while we put a big emphasis on, yes, increasing, safe driving scores, driving behaviors, we can do that all day, but I think as Bill referenced earlier, there's still that importance of having a good back-end process for when these accidents do occur. How can we help streamline some of the back-end process? Because again, it's going through, we can identify, and improve our own driver scores, but there's still other drivers out there on the road.
Excellent. Bill?
Yeah, when we travel around and meet with our clients, most of the stories you hear are stories that fall outside of what we've been talking about today, right? So it's the unusual accident where the unregistered, unlicensed, uninsured driver swerves around and hits an emergency vehicle and costs the government a significant amount of money. Or the light accident where the two drivers say, no harm, no foul. Let's forget about reporting this. Let's just walk away. Right? And then all of a sudden the government finds it's got a claim for a significant amount of money that it didn't even know about. So there are so many situations that fall outside of what we're talking about that we hear about. It's really getting your arms around that, ensuring your drivers are reporting anything that happens, however insignificant, right? It's trying to avoid those outliers with the best policies we can have in place. You'll always incur the unforeseen, but control what you can control, right? Control your process and ensure your drivers are abiding by your process in the most efficient way, and you'll help keep your costs down over time. And I think that's the best way to approach it.
Yeah, I think for me is I've worked with so many fleets over the years, and in the initial conversation, collision management isn't really something that we're too worried about. We really don't get into many crashes, if any, every year. And realistically, what tends to happen is there's a visibility gap in data. And what we find is that a lot of those repairs that are taking place just fall into an overall maintenance spend bucket or an overall repair spend that really doesn't drill down into the detail on what's happening. And you really start to get in a situation where folks were under the impression that, man, we hadn't been in a crash in many years. Come to find out, they're much like the majority of the fleets that we work with that have somewhere between a 15 and 20% frequency rate in terms of getting into crashes every year. So we're going to jump right into the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you guys, so please send your questions through the Q&A panel, and we'll get to as many as possible. I do see that we've had a first one that's come through, and I'll pose this one to Bill, and Manny, I'll let you take over after that. But Bill, we got a question in from Nation Safe Drivers, and the question was, how does Element Fleet coordinate fleet vehicle accidents? Towing to the repair facility, removal of vehicles from the impound lot, and coordination of damaged vehicle to repair facility or salvage yard, ensuring the least cost, least downtime, and maximization of savings.
Yeah, I think that, and thank you for the question. I think that kind of goes back to our process. We look at collision management holistically. We have a network of repair shops across North America. I will say one thing. When I came to Element, one of the biggest surprises, upside surprises I discovered is our strategic alliances group, which works with our shop networks and brings shops on board, reviews those shops. They have a fairly intimate knowledge across the United States. They know where the sensitive regions are. They know right down to the individual shop, and I've tested them on this. They have amazing memories of their experiences. So having that relationship and that depth of knowledge of the shops gives us that unique knowledge, right? We're experts in every region. We know what the costs involved are. We know what the procedures are. We're very effective at the entire collision management process. So yes, from first notice of loss through the subrogation process, we manage everything for our clients. And we bring that value, that data, that depth of experience, and that depth of shop network to bear for our clients. And that's really where we drive value.
I think the important thing that Bill's touching on as well is the marriage between understanding what is the requirements from our clients with what is industry standard. I think when you have that intentional setup of an integrated accident management program that fits within our clients' compliance program and their overall fleet policy, we're able to streamline a lot of the, perhaps back and forth that could exist in each one of those parts of the chain that are mentioned in the question. We understand what type of vehicle it is, make sure we have the right record. It goes to a capable shop that, perhaps has a tall enough bay if it's a vehicle that is upfit that can be pulled in. And we also understand the client's replacement schedule. Is this a vehicle that is likely going to be replaced due to the severity? It's all about understanding what our clients' goals are and integrating client policy with best practice.
We did have some other questions come in. If Bill, maybe you can answer this one. For smaller government fleets that may not have the same resources as some of the larger agencies, where should they start if they want to build an effective accident management program?
Yeah, I tend to break it down between beginning, middle, and end, and what a government can control, right? So a government can control reporting of an accident, right? They can train their drivers. They can provide them with guidance in terms of all the information they need to provide after an accident has occurred. The towing, the repair shop, they begin to lose control there, right? They're relying on external sources to assist them. They may have capabilities in terms of settling the final claim and resolving the issue. So along that process, what can I control versus what I really have to outsource and I can't control? I can control the beginning and the end for sure. I can ensure that my drivers are gathering the proper amount of information that they need to. And I can also control final resolution of that claim. I'm going to have someone else repair the vehicle, right? That's where I want to make sure I have the proper metrics for my vendors, right? I'm measuring their performance. I'm ensuring that they're providing good service, that they're fair, that they're efficient. But I can control 2/3 of that process. The interior process, I'm going to have to outsource. Be very good at what you can control limit to what you can and outsource what you need to. But, in terms of the process, be as good as you can at the process you can control versus what you have to outsource. And I think that will lead to success regardless of the size of the fleet.
Thank you, Bill. This one, maybe you can answer, Brian. How can government fleets balance driver privacy concerns with the need to collect telematics data to improve safety?
Yeah, I think it really starts with really just being transparent with what the expectations are and how they are being measured. In most cases, all that's really being asked of them is to follow the standard rules of the road. And then when they do kind of go through, and again, when you're looking at the kind of managing to the safe driving program, it's really kind of how do we go and move away from really kind of the punishment aspect of it. So instead of looking at it as, hey, we're going to punish the worst drivers on our list, focus more on almost like a gamification, right? So can we look to acknowledge or have some rewards-based program for your top safe drivers? And just by nature, I think what we tend to see is folks are competitive with their peers, or they like to have fun with it. So when they see somebody in a weekly or monthly meeting being acknowledged for improved driving, they want to be a part of that as well. So it's kind of really just kind of making that transition away from the kind of that big brother attitude to, hey, all we really want you to do, and it's in the best interest of the drivers themselves. We're just asking and looking for ways, how can we make you safer out there on the roads? And at the end of the day, we're really just ultimately asking you just to follow the basic rules of the road. Don't exceed the speed limit, use your seatbelt. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Brian. We do have one more question, whoever wants to pitch in and answer on this one. If an agency has already invested in some accident management tools, but isn't seeing results, what's the first adjustment you'd recommend they make?
Yeah, so I think for this area, it's twofold. I think first, it depends on what that program is. If it's an in-home solution, I think you want to, phone a friend, reach out to other fleet managers. We have got a wonderful community in the fleet industry within NAFA and AFLA and many of the industry organizations, and so many people are willing to jump in and help. I think the other thing that you can do is, if you are working with a provider, is break down the process. Have a fulsome review that starts all the way at the beginning with your F&OL process, all the way through to the management of the repair, the management and coordination of the rental, but also the recovery aspect throughout subrogation. You should be able to link the actions that are being taken by your provider with your individual fleet policy and your individual fleet goals. If then you're not able to, take a look at improvements and your partner isn't able to drive improvements there, I think at that point it's very fair to have a conversation with other providers that would be able to perform an evaluation. Not necessarily to change, but many folks have been doing things the same way for a long period of time. And a fresh set of eyes will do, at the very least, a comparison as to what may have changed in the market since the last time you looked, but also provide opportunities for you to improve your process as it exists today, just from looking at it through a new lens.
Thanks, Mark. All right, any other thoughts before we close out? Awesome, great presentation. That is all the time that we have for today. But for anyone who asked a question that wasn't answered, we will be following up via email to answer your questions individually. We hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar. I want to again thank Mark Iarillo, Bill Collins, Brian King, and Element for today's presentation. I also want to mention that this webinar will be available on demand on the Government Fleet website at government-fleet.com/webinars. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.